Betel Megiddo, also known as Armageddon.
If you're not too sure what the book of Revelation is, or which book it is part of the New Testament.
The year is 2025. The world teeters on the brink. For millennia, the Bible has foretold a time of tribulation, a period of unprecedented chaos and destruction. Could these ancient prophecies be about to unfold before our very eyes? Journey with us into the heart of Scripture as we explore the 10 scariest prophecies predicted to manifest in 2025. From plagues of unimaginable scale to the rise of a demonic world leader, these chilling predictions will challenge your faith and leave you questioning the fate of humanity. Are you prepared to face the terrifying reality of what lies ahead? 10. Armageddon. Armageddon, described in Revelation 16 verse 16, is the prophesied final battle between good and evil, where the forces of darkness converge to wage war against God. This battle is said to take place in the Valley of Megiddo, a historically significant location in Israel. The prophecy describes this as a climactic confrontation that will determine the fate of humanity and the culmination of God's divine plan. The imagery of nations gathering for war highlights the global nature of this event, uniting the world in a final struggle for dominance and survival. The Middle East, particularly Israel, continues to be a hotbed of political and military tension, echoing the conditions described in Revelation. The region's strategic and religious significance has drawn the attention of world powers, with alliances and rivalries forming around its future. Disputes over Jerusalem and its sacred sites intensify, with nations posturing for influence in ways that align eerily with the prophetic narrative. This escalation of conflicts suggests that the stage is being set for the fulfillment of the Armageddon prophecy. Armageddon is to be revealed in the apocalypse, not just as a battle between armies, but as a cosmic battleground in which the armies of good and evil are really fighting over the soul of everything. Here are the forces of good, which are the armies of heaven, fighting with Antichrist and his followers, humanity's final rebellion against God. This battle marks the end of the choices of humanity to either follow God's truth or yield to worldly deceptions. The prophecy does naught but remind us that the events played out on earth are part of a larger spiritual tapestry. Most importantly, Armageddon binds the believer not as a tale of death, but a tale of hope and divine justice. It seals the end of evil's reign and brings about God's final dominion. As the world watches tensions flare and conflicts explode, the prophecy evokes vigilance and faith. Armageddon means God will triumph through the genius of a righteous plan, even in chaos and despair, and peace will one day be restored. That is the promise that even in the most perverse hours of humanity, light and redemption will conquer. Think you've seen the worst? What comes next is a fiery reckoning that will leave you breathless. 9. The Purification by Fire. The prophecy of the purification by fire, as described in 2 Peter 3 verse 10, speaks of a day when the heavens and the earth will be consumed by fire, laying bare all that humanity has created. Peter describes this event as coming like a thief, sudden and unexpected, leaving no time for preparation. This fiery judgment signifies not only the destruction of the physical world, but also the cleansing of sin and corruption, making way for a new heaven and a new earth. It is a profound reminder of the impermanence of worldly things and the ultimate sovereignty of God. In today's world, the idea of destruction by fire feels increasingly plausible, given the global threats humanity faces. The specter of nuclear war looms large, with tensions between nuclear-armed nations escalating. A single misstep could unleash catastrophic consequences, fulfilling the vision of fire consuming the earth. Beyond war, the effects of climate change, raging wildfires, rising temperatures, and the destruction of ecosystems present another avenue by which this prophecy could unfold. These modern dangers echo the warnings of 2 Peter, urging humanity to reflect on its actions and priorities. Purification by fire involves both destruction and renewal, as the heavens and earth are consumed by fire and transformed into a new creation. Just as fire purifies the precious metal through burning away the impurities, this event will be the precursor of bringing forth the new, unblemished world, meaning it is the fulfillment of God's plan to remove sin and establish his eternal kingdom. For believers, this prophecy resonates with their hazy hope behind frightening imagery that promises them a time of righteousness when God's justice will be realized. And thus, this prophecy calls people to an urgent consideration of their present spiritual state and the inherently fleeting reality of their material possessions and powers. Furthermore, it lends a sense of urgency in calling them to repentance and faith in a God-centered alignment of living. As the calamities of the world seem in increasing magnitude, it is becoming ever more relevant to hear the words of 2 Peter 3, verse 10. Cleansing by fire reminds us that while human hands bring destruction, God's redemptive purpose is invariably at work in profitable ways, providing avenues towards salvation and security into eternal peace. 8. The rise of the Antichrist. The prophecy of the Antichrist, as described in Revelation 13, warns of a figure who will rise to power during the end times. This leader is depicted as possessing unparalleled charisma, capable of uniting nations and commanding loyalty across the globe. While his promises of peace and prosperity may seem appealing, his true nature is one of deception and rebellion against God. The Antichrist will embody the ultimate opposition to divine authority, leading humanity astray under the guise of unity and progress. Revelation 13 reveals that the Antichrist will wield immense influence, consolidating political, economic, and spiritual power. He will establish a global system that demands allegiance, punishing those who resist. The prophecy describes him as blaspheming God and performing signs and wonders to deceive even the faithful. This combination of power and manipulation makes him an unparalleled threat to humanity's spiritual integrity. The Antichrist's reign will not just be one of oppression, but also a test of faith for believers. With modern progress, the pathway for the ascendancy of Antichrist is found in raising questions. World calls for oneness, and world coalitions, or the push for New World Order, demands collective advancement rather than individual self-sovereignty. Technological, social, and economic advancements fit perfectly into the control system described in Revelation. Leaders with all kinds of green policies favoring peace, but vindictive policies against people mirror prophetic aspects. Thus, the Antichrist-type spirit has already been brought into the world. The rise of the Antichrist serves as a warning and also a challenge to vigilance. In particular, it reminds believers to distinguish truth from deceit and to stay anchored in faith. The Antichrist in the Bible is not merely a fable of fearfulness. It foreshadows a spiritual warfare that ought to be encountered by man. It begs preparation because it requires curtailing false promises to trust eternal truth in God. 7. The mark of the beast. Revelation 13, verse 16 to 18, introduces one of the most chilling aspects of biblical prophecy, the mark of the beast. This mark, described as being placed on the right hand or forehead, is a symbol of allegiance to the Antichrist and his global system of control. Without it, individuals will be unable to buy or sell, effectively excluding them from economic and social participation. The prophecy emphasizes that this mark, associated with the number 6666, represents total submission to the Antichrist's rule, marking a definitive choice between loyalty to God and loyalty to worldly power. In today's world, advancements in technology appear to mirror the conditions necessary for this prophecy to unfold. Digital currencies, biometric identification, and implantable microchips are becoming increasingly common, presenting both convenience and potential for misuse. Governments and corporations are integrating systems of surveillance and control that monitor financial transactions, personal behavior, and even movement. Social credit systems in some countries hint at a future where access to basic resources could be restricted based on compliance with specific regulations, aligning with the vision of a global system described in Revelation. It is the very idea of the mark of a beast by which the shivers travel through the spine of all rational beings that likely raises a few concerns about personal freedom and privacy. Such systems will soon, using a mark, deprive people from the benefit of participating in the economy, and then further take these people to a totally oppressive system of compliance and submission. It is a mark of technology, but in a broader aspect, the mark is, so to speak, one of spiritual allegiance, loyalty to worldly systems above devotion to God. Quite a serious choice as depicted in Revelation, a choice not just practical, but deep in morality and spirituality, bringing forth what is at stake for humanity in the times of the end. The prophecy is an admonition against the insidious encroachments of such systems to believers, making possible reliance on faith and loyalty to God's truth under great duress. The mark of the beast is more than an icon. It is a watershed moment of decision, individuals and societies alike. He who keeps his mind alert to signs and stouting convictions is preparing himself to walk this world bent over even further under the strain of the forces prophesied in Revelation, and so they will navigate the increasingly harrowing reality. 6. The four horsemen of the Apocalypse. The four horsemen of the Apocalypse, described in Revelation 6 verse 1-8, are some of the most vivid and powerful symbols in biblical prophecy. Each rider represents a force that brings destruction upon the earth, conquest, war, famine, and death. They serve as harbingers of the end times, unleashing calamities that shake the foundations of human civilization. The imagery of the four horsemen is a stark reminder of the fragility of worldly systems and the inevitability of divine judgment. The first rider, mounted on a white horse, symbolizes conquest. This figure represents a force that seeks to dominate and control, often under the guise of righteousness or peace. In the modern context, this could relate to political or ideological movements that appear benevolent but ultimately lead to division and strife. The second rider, on a red horse, brings war and conflict. With rising tensions between nations and the ever-present threat of nuclear escalation, the prophecy resonates deeply with today's geopolitical landscape. The third horseman rides a black horse, signifying famine. He holds a pair of scales in his hand, representing deprivation and a lack of basic essentials that an increasing number of people are finding unaffordable, luxuries even. Already, we are reaping the effects of climate change, disruption in supply chains, and recession. Food insecurity is on the rise globally. The final one rides on a pale horse and embodies death, which follows closely after conquest, war, and famine. The consequences of this rider can be felt through massive deaths, interrelating all these forces that bring humanity to their knees. These four horsemen are not mere abstractions, but have their own place and continued reality in an actual world, known for the marks of conflict, suffering, and instability. Their presence would become a warning of what is to come and an invitation for spiritual preparedness. This very prophecy teaches believers the value of faith and endurance in times of trials and temptations. It declares that although the forces of the four horsemen seem to be unstoppable, they are still part of a far-reaching plan, which leads finally toward the victory of God's justice and the restoration of his kingdom altogether. The prophecy of the four horsemen serves as an even deeper reflection on how mankind's problems interrelate. The forces of conquest, war, famine, and death are not singular events, but cyclical forces that can exacerbate one another. The very survival of human systems and an entire world's consequences borne by choices motivated by greed, power, and neglect become part of this very precariousness. For believers, this is a call to realize the spiritual dimensions of these crises so that they may respond with compassion, faith, and a commitment to justice. Humanity will thus rightly pay attention to the real cause of these calamities, which will allow it to be in a better position to face the trials scripted out in the sacred texts while pushing closer towards God's redemptive end. Just when you thought it couldn't get more intense, the next prophecy enters the holiest battleground. 5. The rebuilding of the Third Temple. The prophecy of the rebuilding of the Third Temple in Jerusalem holds profound significance in biblical end times narratives. In Matthew 24 verse 15, Jesus refers to the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, a reference to events that will occur in the temple during the final days. For centuries, the temple has been a central symbol of God's presence among his people. Its prophesied reconstruction marks a pivotal moment in biblical eschatology, signaling the fulfillment of critical end times events and the nearness of the Messiah's return. Today, discussions about rebuilding the Third Temple have gained momentum, particularly among religious groups and political leaders in Israel. The Temple Mount, where the ancient temple once stood, remains one of the most contentious religious and political sites in the world. Currently home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, any attempt to rebuild the temple would likely spark significant conflict. This tension underscores the complexity of the prophecy and its potential to shape global events. The rebuilding of the temple is not only a physical event, but a spiritual and prophetic event. The restoration of God's covenant with his people, and the fulfillment of promises that have lasted for ages have been alluded to this event. Yet the prophecy warns of great tribulation as the temple becomes the scene for abomination of desolation, which will be the ushering for a time of great trial. This is part of the complex prophecy, at once a fulfillment of hope and a herald of tribulation. And for many theologians, one of the most important points of interest in end times theology. To believers, it leaves a prophecy of the third temple calling for vigilance and reflection, while at the same time taking cognizance of God's sovereignty and walking into his divine plan. The tensions surrounding the Temple Mount and mounting momentum toward its rebuilding challenge individuals to examine their own faith and preparedness for events foretold in Scripture. As the world watches the city of Jerusalem evolve, the rebuilding of the Third Temple remains one of the strongest symbols of the times and calls on man to remain steadfast in trust and faith in God's ultimate purposes. The reconstruction of the Third Temple is representative of the complex interplay between prophecy, faith, and geopolitical realities. Many interpret the rebuilding of the temple to imply a convergence of history, faith, and politics across the globe, in addition to being biblical prophecy fulfillment. Its importance is beyond that of different religions, and people's attention from various countries is drawn to it, giving rise to in-depth discussions about the greater implications for peace and conflict in the Middle East. And all of this build-up reflects the very delicate relationship between heavenly desires and earthly realities, reminding believers of the deep interrelation between divine prophecy and human history. 4. The return of Jesus Christ. The return of Jesus Christ, as foretold in Matthew 24, verse 30, is the ultimate fulfillment of biblical prophecy and the cornerstone of Christian hope. Jesus describes this event as a moment of unmatched glory, when the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all nations will witness his return. This event marks the culmination of God's divine plan, bringing judgment to the world and establishing his eternal kingdom. For believers, it signifies the end of suffering and the beginning of a new age of righteousness and peace. The prophecy emphasizes the dramatic nature of Christ's return, with the heavens parting and Jesus descending in power and majesty. It will be a visible, undeniable event that shakes the foundations of the world. The nations will mourn in regret and despair as they witness the magnitude of Christ's return, realizing the truth of God's judgment. This prophecy serves as a stark reminder that Christ's return will not only be a time of joy for the faithful, but also a day of reckoning for those who oppose him. In the world today, the signs are becoming more obvious that all those things which Jesus spoke about as signs before his return are now manifesting. Prophets, false prophets, increase of iniquity, wars, earthquakes, and turmoil all over the world sound like warnings from Matthew chapter 24. They are awful occurrences, but they also corroborate the idea that the fulfillment of the promises of God is fast approaching. Those signs would make a true Christian share the concern that he has to communicate the faith to others and prepare his heart for the return of Christ. The event of the return of Jesus is not just a future event, but a very dynamic source of hope and motivation for Christian believers, because they believe there is hope that, in spite of the present situation and confusion of the world, God's plan will still be completed according to his perfect timing. This prophecy challenges the Christian to purposefulness, watchfulness, and faith in God's promises. Such signs of the times manifestly began to be harsh indications of the soon return of Christ and inspired the believer to press on toward glory, because the hope of a sublime and eternal kingdom waits at its end. And so, the second coming of Jesus Christ shows that his reign is universal and that all creation will one day live in the ultimate unity of his rule. This is a moment beyond any divisions of human culture, nationality, or creed, bringing all humanity face to face with divinity. For believers, there is gospel prophecy that should inspire action and offer comfort in that they need to evangelize and live lives that glorify God's love and righteousness. This is the time of fulfilling everything out, making wrongs right, as all promises of redemption and restoration will be fully realized, and from the broken world, one has an unprecedented hope. 3. The signs of the end times. The signs of the end times, as outlined in various biblical prophecies, serve as warnings and reminders of the approaching culmination of God's divine plan. These signs include wars, natural disasters, famines, pestilence, and the rise of false prophets. Jesus spoke of these events in Matthew 24, describing them as the beginning of birth pains. These occurrences are not random, but part of a greater narrative, pointing to a time when the world will experience profound upheaval as it moves toward its ultimate destiny. In today's world, many of these signs are becoming increasingly evident. Global conflicts, such as wars and political unrest, dominate headlines, while natural disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, wildfires, and floods seem more frequent and severe. Famines and pandemics, including recent health crises, highlight humanity's vulnerability and the interconnectedness of these events. Together, they create a sense of urgency, reminding believers that the fulfillment of these prophecies may be closer than ever. The increase of false prophets and the increase of wickedness are vitally signs of the end times. Not only in adherence with the biblical warning is modernity marked by deceptive doctrines, degeneration of morals, and abandonment of faith, but also, as a believer, all these are tested in the faith before God and emphasize the need for spiritual discernment between good and evil. False promises of worldly solutions often distract from God's eternal truth, as warned in Matthew 24. Therefore, remaining in the Scripture is more relevant. These time signs also herald action for believers. They are echoes that instill and encourage Christians to strengthen their faith, preach the good news, and refocus efforts to prepare for Christ's second coming. They remind believers to purposefully live in vigilance, even knowing that there is turmoil. For indeed, the amazing plan of God is going as perfectly as He intended, and His kingdom is drawing nearer. Though the signs appear to have a shot in prophecy, offer hope against the bleakness of the promise, they shine toward hoping for a world made new in the fulfillment of God's promises. Moreover, there is the increased urgency of these signs due to the global interconnections of economies, technology, and information, which have increased their impact and made them impossible to ignore. Events which previously could have been considered isolated have continued to spread across borders, exposing the frail and precarious nature of human systems. Social unrest, economic malaise, and the frenetic pace of disinformation have helped create terror and uncertainty appropriate for the scriptural conditions. Such developments challenge believers to stand firm in their faith and distinguish the truth in the midst of a world awash in lies and, without a doubt, add to the continuing relevance of biblical prophecies to guide humanity through these tough times. 2. The destruction of Damascus. Isaiah 17 presents a striking prophecy about the fate of Damascus, declaring that it will no longer be a city, but a heap of ruins. One of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, Damascus holds a significant place in history and culture. The prophecy predicts its complete destruction, signifying a dramatic turning point in the end times. This chilling vision serves as a reminder of the impermanence of even the most enduring human achievements when faced with divine judgment. In recent years, the ongoing Syrian conflict has brought immense destruction to Damascus and its surroundings. Airstrikes, artillery fire, and relentless warfare have caused widespread devastation, leaving parts of the city in ruins. While Damascus has endured countless challenges throughout history, the scale and intensity of its current suffering raise questions about whether Isaiah's prophecy is nearing fulfillment. The city's decline from a thriving metropolis to a war-torn battleground seems to align with the grim picture painted in the Bible. Damascus' destruction holds both physical and symbolic significance, representing the fall of a great historical city and God's judgment on rebellion and sin. Physically, it denotes only the fall of one of the great historical centers in humanity, a center of culture and a center of power. Symbolically, it is the denudation of the exposure of judgment under God upon a world stewing in rebellion and sin. It underlines the prophecy that no city, no nation, not even the most potent empire, will escape the fate of moral and spiritual decay. It is probably the most startling warning concerning human institutions' fragility and God's ultimate authority over all creation. For believers, the prophecy of Damascus is a challenge to reflection regarding the condition of the world and the unfolding purposes of God. It creates a sense of the need for faith and vigilance on uncertain days. As modern events bring Isaiah's vision into sharper reality, it challenges us to consider how we live in the face of such prophetic declarations. Damascus's devastation marks not the city's downfall, but an indication of the more encompassing spiritual narrative at work, the one calling all humanity to repentance, resilience, and trust in the sovereignty of God. Moreover, The destruction of Damascus adds more of the layered meanings to the prophecy, since it serves as a warning against the pitfalls of extended wars and human pride. It personifies the thin-skinned fragility of the civilizations that supersede peace and purity with might and dominion. Through the passage of ages, Damascus has only been reverberating all over the cavern of human genius and human endurance, yet has prophesied her downfall, which therefore reminds that no city or nation is immune to the reverberating blasts of violence, corruption, and rebellious acts against divine principles. Such is the message on nations and individuals, insisting on the pursuit of reconciliation, humility, and alignment with God's will. Otherwise, they will end up in similar fates of ruin and desolation. What follows is the ultimate downfall, a prophecy that dominates this list. 1. The fall of modern Babylon. The prophecy of the fall of Babylon in Revelation 18 depicts the sudden and complete collapse of a city, symbolizing wealth, decadence, and moral decay. Babylon, whether understood as a literal city or a metaphor for a corrupt global system, represents a world built on greed, exploitation, and the worship of material wealth. The prophecy describes merchants mourning its destruction as their vast fortunes and luxurious lifestyles crumble in an instant. This dramatic imagery warns of the fragility of human achievements and the consequences of prioritizing materialism over morality. Modern parallels to Babylon are strikingly evident in today's world. The relentless pursuit of wealth, consumerism, and power has created a global system that mirrors the characteristics described in Revelation. Economic inequality, environmental exploitation, and the moral compromises often made in the name of progress reflect a society that prioritizes gain over the well-being of others. The prophecy serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of unchecked ambition and the eventual downfall of systems that perpetuate injustice and moral decay. Divine justice is one side to the story of the fall of Babylon. Destruction is another. That is how Revelation 18 pronounces this calamity, a punishment from God to humanity for its revolt and idolatry. The fall of Babylon was an unmistakable event to show that no system, however solid or entrenched, can withstand the judgment of God. The prophecy serves as a reminder to believers that their hope should not be based on the transient wealth of this world, but on the eternal promises of God. This prophecy has got soul-searching and vigilance. It's probing into the values of people or communities, then landing at the point of looking into what they erected their lives upon. The fall of the modem Babel could be that demonstration against all odds of moral and spiritual negligence amidst a scurrying world with themes such as inequalities, corruption, and environmental degradation. Turning away from such possessions and embracing a life of justice, compassion, and faith in God as to the ultimate plan can also be part of a broader holy awakening. Just as important as the fall of Babylon is that it symbolizes the trust of humankind in what has been fashioned by its own hands. The ruin of Babylon, therefore, turns out to be the great alarm bell by which the present generation will wake to the realization that all its attempts at building a utopia on the foundations of greed, power, and self-gratification will end in failure. The prophecy compels individuals and communities to look inward at oneself and one's own values. It envisions the retreat from dependence on ephemeral material wealth toward eternity of such principles as integrity, humility, and service to others. Thus, the fall of Babylon becomes not only a warning of judgment, but also an invitation to redemption and change. Thank you for joining us on this journey through these chilling prophecies. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on more thought-provoking content. And don't go anywhere. Click on the next video displayed on your screen to continue exploring the mysteries that shape our world. See you there.